Hey guys, this episode with Jeff Dorian is amazing. Jeff is a serial entrepreneur. He started a super successful branding company out of Toronto, then opened up their LA office, and then pivoted into the cannabis industry. So we get into all of that. We also talk about Jeff's experience with plant medicines, specifically psychedelics, and his experience there, which is, gosh, so interesting. I appreciate Jeff's bravery, his openness, and this guy's amazing. I have nothing but admiration and respect for him. Hope you enjoy it.
That works.
And we're live. Jeffrey.
We're rolling. What's up, Sean?
My dear friend, my old friend.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Thanks for being on the podcast, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
You're our first podcast here at Clock Tower Ventures in Santa Monica.
What a beautiful space.
They were kind enough to let us use this space for our podcast. So you are the first episode that we're doing here.
I love that you can see the beach right behind your shoulder.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's
you have ocean views. It's in the heart of Santa Monica.
Yep.
Yeah, we're super lucky and very grateful to Clock Tower Ventures for allowing us to film and record here.
Big shout out.
How are you, man?
I'm good.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
You're rocking a nice hat. Only good vibes.
I love this hat.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like...
I found it on a shop in Montana.
Yeah, Montana, Santa Monica.
Yeah, Santa Monica.
Not Montana, the state.
I'm a local here.
Yeah,
so are you, right?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't always a local.
No, not always.
Born and raised in Canada.
Canada.
Our brothers up north.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters, I should say.
Brothers and sisters. Yeah.
So... what brought you to Los Angeles? But before we jump into that,
right?
Actually, let's tell the audience how you and I know each other. So how did we meet?
Well, we met. Part of the story is I had an advertising agency once upon a time, and we had some space on Ince Boulevard across from Culver Studios in Culver City.
In Culver City.
And we were subletting that space, and it was a really beautiful space. And you showed up with more than one people, but you showed up with a company called Prohibited.
Yeah, Prohibited Media. I was representing them.
Yeah, Prohibited at the time was in cannabis, and they were raising a boatload of money. Mm-hmm. They were actually very successful in a bunch of raises. Unfortunately, they're not around anymore.
Yeah.
But some of the founders I'm still buddies with. So shout out to Keith Huffman.
Yeah, Keith's a good guy.
Yeah.
So the funny thing about that is we originally went out into the market to go look at a building right next to you. And they didn't like that space for whatever reason.
Yep.
And they saw your building that was in the same parking lot. And they're like, that space looks amazing.
Yep.
Like, we would love to sublease or lease that building. And like, I was like, let's go knock on the door. Let's go see if they'd be open to sublease. And then you open the door, you know, you and I start chatting and you're like, yeah, actually the space is on the market for sublease. You guys want to come in? And we just start touring the space. And I think like you and I just like hit it off.
Just a good vibe.
I got your number. Yeah.
Based
exactly.
on the hat, right?
On the hat. Only good vibes. So I got your number and then we walked the space. I think a week later, you and I went and grabbed a coffee or lunch.
Yep.
Started to create a relationship and like it turned into a bunch of other stuff.
It did.
But like, I don't know. I guess what I would say to the audience is like fortune favors the bold, and like
right?
I just knocked on the door and
hey,
a nice guy answers and says, "Hey, how can I help you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, can we see your space?" And then here we are today after maybe 8 years.
It's probably been around
8 years, give or take.
Yeah.
And now,
because that was before. I've been in the cannabis industry for a little bit, so it was before cannabis was legal in California.
Oh yeah, that was like
it was a while back.
When Prohibited Media was looking for space. It was definitely like
16,
touch and
17.
go. Yeah, it was like
maybe?
still kind of like it was not as widely accepted as it is now.
Nowhere close.
Yeah. So then you and I created a relationship.
Yep.
Okay, that was when you were with your branding agency, and then we created this this men's workout group.
That was fun.
That was really fun. So to the audience, Jeff is in great shape. He has had a pretty epic health journey, which I can't wait to get into. But we both we created a relationship, right? And then you and I started working out together, and we're like, we should just start bringing together other guys.
Guys that are interested in sharing, building good vibes.
Yeah.
We generally had some really interesting people come in and run the class. It was right at the stairs at the end of Montana.
Yeah.
So it was outdoors.
But we decided on Wednesday mornings at 6:30.
Yep.
And we'd bring in some type of trainer or fitness expert to lead a workout session.
Yeah. And they would generally always share a word with the guys.
Yeah.
Some sort of encouragement. There'd be a breath work, generally speaking, and we'd no matter what month, we would generally end with an ocean swim to get in there. It was fantastic. What a great way to start a Wednesday.
And it started with like, I don't know, just me and you doing it. And then it got to like 3, 4.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, how big do you think was the biggest tribe session? And that's what we called it.
You know, remember we had some really cool guests, you know, Kirk Westwood. We had Eben Britton.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Eben was pretty epic. Shout out to Eb. I would say, what, 20, 25?
No, we had more than that. 30? I have a photo. Yeah,
I don't
we
know.
probably had like 30, 40. Yeah.
We have a couple of great photos.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
Rain or shine, we'd show up. And it was actually because of that, because of you and I creating Tribe, right? So a guy showed up from Canada by the name of Devin Watson.
Yes.
And Devin Watson and I became friends. I started working out with him outside of Tribe. I introduced him to my sister.
Yep.
And they are currently on their honeymoon right now.
That's fantastic.
Isn't that so cool? I mean, gosh, like, that's just crazy that had I never met you, right, knocked on that door, created a relationship, you and I created Tribe, Devin might not have ever been in my life and then might not ever been in Kelly's life. And like,
crazy, right?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sliding doors, right?
Yeah. Or like, I don't know. God is good.
God is good.
That's super cool. So yeah, you and I, and to the audience, we have a history together. It's a lot of good times.
A great history. Yeah, and Tribe was always founded on just building people up, right? Knowing that men, especially back then, this was before COVID, right?
Yeah.
This is going back a while.
Well, that's why we stopped because COVID happened.
COVID happened, so we did it for what, a couple of years prior to that, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it was really searching for a place where men could just share with each other, be there for each other, right? And sort of build out like a literal tribe.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
And doing that through fitness.
Yep.
Right? Like,
yep.
There's something about being out there with another guy where you're sweating and you're kind of pushing it and working out with one another. I'm an ex-athlete. I think, did you do
hockey?
Yeah.
You know, I've played a bunch of different sports, but a lot of it's been snowboarding.
Yeah.
My current obsession is motorcycling.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait to get into that. But recreationally, like, right, sports has a way of bonding people.
100%.
Playing sports together. And so, like, I found some of my deepest relationships were actually through fitness. Like, going through that experience together, it does something, right?
Agreed.
I heard something one time that like men like to bond shoulder to shoulder versus just like staring at each other from across the table.
Agreed.
And so I found some of my most profound conversations have actually been on like walks when I'm like side by side with another guy, right? Or like going on a trail run or a hike or doing a workout together. There's something about that experience where it really like creates a deeper relationship and you're more willing to like open up and have
you're outside,
vulnerable
you're active,
conversations.
you're moving.
Yeah.
Right? You've got like crazy scenery that's flashing through the miles that you're walking too, right? So your brain is probably just opened up, right? It's primed to be able to have and share and have great conversations.
Definitely. That was fun. That was a very fun time.
It was a great time.
So let's go back to the early days. Canadian. Do you miss it?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, you miss lots of places about home. You know, I grew up in a little island called Prince Edward Island, which is in the far east coast. 100 and maybe 50,000 people or something like that now. Might have had 130,000 when I was growing up. And, you know, growing up on a little island, it's different. But I always wanted to live in the big city, right? I was always, I'll say called, you know, I'm a child of a teenager of the 80s, right?
What does that mean?
Hairband metal, kind of that kind of thing. That was all influenced out of Los Angeles back in the day. Skate culture, like all these different sort of cultures that is predominantly SoCal.
You into punk rock?
Of course. I mean, I love punk rock, like, but it's all of that energy, right? Because it's just this energetic exchange. And I think LA, as crazy as it is on a lot of ways, there's a vibration, there's a creative vibration that people are allowed to sort of express here. Have you ever been traveling and told people where you live and you go, I live in LA, and they're like, oh, really? Tell me more, kind of thing. It's either that or they just hate it. Like there's almost nothing in between. So I always had that attraction to LA. As I hit 18 and moved out of my parents' house and went to Toronto, the big city, so to speak, I met my wife there. We just celebrated 25 years married in September. So that was fantastic. Shout out to my wonderfully beautiful wife. So we met there and decided to move to Ottawa, which is Canada's capital. She had two sisters. Both of them were coincidentally, one lived there, the other one was looking at relocating. So we all ended up in Ottawa together. I found myself living with three sisters. Ended up
Early on
married
in your
with one.
marriage?
Very. We weren't married at the time.
Oh.
And as we started to build our life there, I got into the advertising agency game through sort of a bunch of different things, but started an advertising agency with a guy named Mike Burns, who I think you know, Mike. You've met him from when we were looking at subletting that last place.
Yeah, I remember Mike.
And a couple other partners. We got really lucky, and we kind of hit it out of the park and built that business for, very close to 20 years. And from that, we got to work with some just incredible brands, right? From McDonald's, we ran the Happy Meal business for a bunch of years. We worked with some of the best toy companies in the world, from Hasbro and Mattel, and we worked with a bunch of the studios, and we were really experts in creating content, engaging content, right, at the end of the day, and it was all digital based. As we built out that business, a lot of our business was here in LA. So I would travel for work probably every 6 to 12 weeks here in LA, spend a week or so, plus other travel, had a young family. So back in 2009, I was on the road a lot, felt like I didn't see my family for basically from the new year till around middle of Feb. And when I got home, it was freezing. And I mean, literally minus 30 degrees Celsius.
Gosh, I can't even imagine what that's like.
Well, I mean, Fahrenheit and Celsius meet at minus 40, so it's not fun. It's not pleasant at all. So we were out for dinner, and I just popped the question. I said, what would you think about moving to LA? And kind of without missing a beat, she said, as long as we can live in Santa Monica, I'm in. So that was February. That May of 2009, we came here for a long weekend. We looked at 30 plus houses. On the last house that we found was the one we picked, sort of thing, or it picked us. And we moved our family here in July of 2009.
Wow.
So it's been a really interesting sort of run, right? I've got now two boys that are 21 and 19 that have literally gone through the entire school system here in Santa Monica. So, instead of playing, well, my both boys played hockey, but instead of just playing hockey, I get to see my oldest son be on the surf team and stuff like that. That's pretty cool, right?
Very cool.
We didn't have that growing up, so.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
What a cool adventure.
Yeah,
for
it's
the
been
family.
really, really, really fun.
And to have like the support of your wife being like, yeah, I'm all for moving to Santa Monica.
Yeah,
I guess it makes sense when you think about.
Let's go, baby.
You think about right now it's early November and it's perfect weather outside.
Oh.
I don't know what the weather's like in Canada. I'm sure the trees are beautiful.
Listen, I mean,
Fall in
it's
Canada's, I bet, incredible, but
it's incredible.
February probably gets pretty tough.
Little bit, like basically from December through, if you're lucky, April.
Yeah. What was the initial culture shock? Like when you first got here, what were the things that you were like, whoa, that's new. I'm not used to that.
I think the biggest thing moving here as a Canadian, and we became citizens a couple years ago while COVID was happening. Thank you. So we make a conscious choice to live here, right?
Wait, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So I heard recently if you become a citizen and you have dual citizenship,
Yeah.
in order to become a U.S. citizen, you basically have to declare that if there was a war, you would choose the United States. Is that accurate or no?
Great question. I don't really know. The U.S. basically
makes sense to me to a certain extent, but I don't know if that actually happens.
They don't recognize your citizenship anymore once you become a U.S. citizen, your old citizenship. Although they don't make you get rid of your passport. So.
Okay, so we were talking about your kind of initial shock in moving here. Some things that you were like.
Oh yeah, so. Probably the
say.
biggest thing is you realize there's no social safety net.
What does that mean?
Well, Canada is a fairly socialist country, especially these days. But I always grew up with socialized medicine as an example. So the upside of socialized medicine, I've never seen a medical bill until I moved here. I had no idea that staying in a hospital for a day, getting a day surgery would cost, say, $20,000 or whatever it costs. And the Tylenol and the anesthesia and everything else is itemized. I've never seen that moving here. So that was interesting.
Would you say the medical system here is better than the medical system there?
I would say if you're part of the have class versus the have not class, if you've got the money to have the good insurance here, then it's far superior. Only because in Canada, as far as I still know, it's a get in line now. So you might be waiting months or years. I know many family members that don't have doctors anymore. They can't find a doctor that has any free time in their schedule. So they've got an immigration challenge as well. There's been a lot of people immigrating there, and the social services just have not been growing at the same rate. So there's challenges there, but I think if you have to be sick somewhere and you have good insurance, I would pick the U.S. far and away. Yeah, personally.
Yeah. So the healthcare system was a bit shocking to you. Anything else?
I think because of that, there's probably a little bit of a manicness as well around this. I think the other side of it is in the U.S., people do really celebrate your success and they help you get there, right? I think in just the idea of socialism, it's harder to sort of climb out of that bucket, if you will, in Canada, where you don't necessarily want to be the tall poppy sort of thing that gets your head cut off.
So I've heard of the tall poppy syndrome, but in
I think
Australia,
that's Australia.
Yeah, Australia.
I know that because of Kirk, our mutual friend.
Got it.
I hear that from him. I think they would call it like crabs in a bucket, like for
Explain
frogs
the
in a
poppy
bucket,
syndrome.
that sort of thing.
Or poppy seed syndrome, like what exactly that means.
I think
for
the
people
tall
that aren't
poppy
familiar.
from the Australian side of it is as you grow up in a poppy field, if your head gets too high, you get chopped off by a lawnmower or something like that. Is how I look at it.
Experience that same thing kind of a little bit in Canada.
Again, we had a lot of success in Canada as business guys, but we didn't do any business in Canada. We had a lot of staff members that we were lucky to work with, some absolutely ridiculous talent that we were lucky enough to attract and work with for a decade or more. But I think it's just seeing how the system works here is people really do celebrate your success. They help you get there, and as you become more successful, it's like you get, on one hand, you get more fans, if you will, that want to help you get there. But there's probably a downside to that too, because there's a bit of an almost ickiness that you see in, I'll say maybe LA culture more so than just overall US culture, but it's a bit maybe it's a shallowness, right? A shallowness. But on the flip side, on the creative side, like I said, you get so much creative juices that are happening everywhere in this city. I think a lot of people have a hard time following through with a lot of their commitments, right? It's almost like they're shallow commitments a lot of the times.
Yes.
And a lot of people have 58 things going on as opposed to 2 or 3 things that they're actually going to see through to the end and actually get it done the right way.
That's such a Los Angeles thing. I thought it was like I called it the flaky millennial, where it's like you get invited somewhere and you don't commit to it until the day of, because you want to see like what other options come your way.
Yep.
Or you commit to something and then the day of you pull out. You don't show up. I was talking to a good friend of ours about how there's just a little bit of a culture here in Los Angeles where you can invite people months in advance, and then the day of, you just get text messages of like, hey, I can't make it for like
a random reason.
Like, I get it if like you're sick or like an emergency.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm just not feeling social right now.
Yeah.
You know? Like, and I get everyone has like a to a certain degree, a social battery.
Yep.
But like, you got to follow through with what you say you're going to do.
If you commit to something, show up.
If you commit to something, you got to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to show up.
It was like sports with our kids growing up. If you got to commit to it, then you're going to do it for your season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was never allowed to quit.
Ever.
If I signed up for a sport, I had to see it through.
Yep.
And I think it's easy to kind of fall into like call it the Los Angeles like flakiness.
Oh, you're okay, I'm okay.
But by the way,
okay.
It makes such a difference if you are the type of person that does what they say they're going to do.
Yep.
I think people really actually take note in that. That's something like we've talked about quite a bit actually on this podcast.
It makes you more trustworthy that way too,
Definitely.
right?
If you're trying to build credibility, don't take the better option. Stick with what you said you were going to do.
Agreed.
Stick with your engagements.
Yeah.
So that was the initial shock to a certain degree, right? Healthcare system, maybe a culture that embraces success, but then also maybe a culture of shallowness or maybe a little bit flakiness.
I think moving to LA too, like I'd be remiss to not like mention just how many people live here.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're looking at the Southern California region's probably north of 18 million people or something crazy like that. So just that the amount of people that are here trying to make it, and a lot of people are doing really well. There's a big chunk in the middle, right? So trying to figure out how the whole system works too was a little bit of an eye-opener, even though I was doing business here. When you're living here, it's just a bit of a different animal to work through, kind of what you like, what you don't. As you know, I'm a guy that sort of leans in and says yes to a lot of things, and just to go try different experiences.
You are definitely a yes man.
It's not in a bad way.
No, not at all. Not at all. If anything, I so appreciate that aspect of your personality where you're like, yeah, man, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's good. That sounds like a cool experience, right? So some of those are just weird when you lean into some of those here and you go, yeah, I'll try that. And then you end up in some weird house up in Hollywood Hills and there's some crazy party going on, right? It's just to go, oh, I've never seen that before. That's interesting, right? So
I don't know if I need to say yes to this person.
Yeah, right? So you just understand kind of, there's just lots of rabbit holes in this place that probably don't exist quite the same in smaller areas.
Yeah, you hit on something that I love about Los Angeles, and that I feel like it's such a mecca in regards to creativity, and what happens here just ripples to the rest of the world. And it's all happening here, and so there's there's an energy behind that. And when you go to other places, you start to have maybe you come from another place and you start experiencing it. But for me, I'm born and raised here. So it was kind of always a part of my life to a certain degree. And it took me moving out of the city to really realize, oh man, Los Angeles in that regard is so amazing. Yeah. And I remember living in another city and being blown away that I'm like, why don't these people want to make this city better? You know, why don't they want to create and it just depends on what people value. And I think what people value here in Los Angeles is kind of what you said. It's a melting pot of creativity, entrepreneurship, people pushing things forward.
It's entertainment. It's everything, right? Yeah. It's culture.
Yeah, it's culture.
Right. At the end of the day, that gets exported extremely well around the world.
Yeah. I would say other places that I think of from a culture standpoint would be Los Angeles, obviously, San Francisco, New York. I think Seattle actually plays, because you think about some of the biggest companies in the world are out of Seattle. So I think they play to a certain degree on what's happening.
No question.
With all of
Especially
us.
If you think through decades, like the grunge movement and things like that really put a spotlight on Seattle.
I think Texas is having a moment, honestly. I think cities
Austin.
like Dallas and Austin.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I think Joe Rogan had a big part of that and moving a bunch of the comedy scene there.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So we moved to Los Angeles with the family.
Yep.
We launched the LA division of the brand agency.
Our agency was called Fuel Industries. And we moved into Culver City, into some of that creative space. So
and you were new to Culver City, as in Culver City is now the hottest market in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And where you were is kind of the center grounds for what's happening in Culver City right now.
Yeah,
but
right
you were
Hayden and National is our first space, right where that staircase
you were
is.
Early.
Right?
You were early to Culver.
Yeah, very early. I think it was early when it was starting to gentrify.
Definitely.
And there was some really cool space there. Right. And I've been lucky in my career to have some really, really cool office space too, which is, as you know, inspiring.
Your office space right now is incredible in Abbot Kinney.
Abbot Kinney, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's what an energetic street, right? What a place.
Yeah, GQ, I think GQ ranked it the coolest street in America at one point.
Yeah. So, just that vibe is just ever present in walls, right? I think there's an energy in buildings, right? That the more you put into this, the more intention you put in, the more you clearly go, oh, wow, this is very intentional space.
Definitely. Cool. So, and that's something you notice coming from the branding background. You're picking up on that more than most people.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the branding background and, one of the latest brands that I'm with a company called iSpire that makes cannabis vape hardware. So we can talk about sort of that journey.
I definitely want to talk about the cannabis industry, but you got into it from the branding agency.
Yeah, well, looking at just branding, I mean, as we know, just like there's a vibe to culture and sort of what this city is. Ergo, it's the same thing for a brand, right? So once you're able to create this sort of attraction to your brand, people go, I don't know why I like that, but I love it. And there's just an energy that a brand puts out that gets some of that energy back, right?
Yeah. What do you think, in regards to someone that's creating a brand right now, if you could give them some advice, what would you tell them?
Be authentic. Just like be authentic and go for it.
Just be real.
Like just be real and go for it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know who I think does that very well? Barstool Sports.
Yeah, no question.
I think in regards to
Yep.
just the brand that he's been able to create, or that team's been able to create, where it was definitely for like the things they were putting out there weren't really things that like corporate America told you it was okay to put out originally, but they just stayed true to who they were, and
Yep.
now they're massive.
They're huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've done a great job.
they've done a really good job. Funny content.
Yeah, very.
Funny content.
Yep.
So branding agency, and then you pivoted to cannabis. Like, what was that kind of like inflection point that you're like, I'm going to get out of this and go into the cannabis industry?
I think there's a health journey there too. It's not just
let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm 52. Back when I was around 40, went to the doctor and my blood sugar was high, and I was ultimately diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And getting that, it's not like my last appointment wasn't like your blood sugar is getting high, but getting that very final, you are a type 2 diabetic, and I was 30 pounds heavier, wasn't intentional about what I ate, drank, exercised, although I did all those sorts of things, right? Going to the doctor, I realized that the doctor, outside of saying, hey, you should stop eating sugar, you should stop, maybe go see a nutritionist and here's her number, but otherwise, here's your new prescription. It's pills, and if you don't improve, you'll be on a needle. So I take that away, and I was kind of shocked, right? Kind of blown away with this very final. Keep in mind, this is 12, 13 years ago. It's not like Instagram there with a gazillion fitness influencers telling you how to eat and what to do and all this sort of thing. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, how serious do I need to take this, right? Do I really need to stop like eating pizza and drinking beer, right? Like, do I really need to stop doing that? And, months went by and I didn't change a whole lot of things, which is what most people do. They don't do anything, right? Which is why the doctor, I think at that point just goes, here's your new regime, if you will, right? We now have one for life. I don't think it's necessarily intentional like that, but I think that's what happens to most people. So next appointment, my numbers are getting worse, right? It's now you've been on whatever medications, metformin and a couple other things. Now you need a statin to protect other parts like your liver. And I'm like, why do I need a statin? So I can see that the doctor is just following the script of, okay, if this happens, then you prescribe this. If this happens, you prescribe that. So luckily, one of my good buddies sent me an article. It was a long read, Atlantic style article. I was flying from LA to Washington for work. He sent it to me. He goes, dude, you got to check this out. It's all about sort of resetting your system for blood sugar. And his dad happens to be an endocrinologist, so a diabetic doctor. So he sent me this, and it just caught me at the right time that I was sitting down in my seat going, okay, I'll give this a read. And as I read it, my subconscious is kind of saying, like, if you're not going to change shit now, when are you going to change? Like, it's time to fucking do something, guy, right? Like, show up for yourself, right? That's kind of what's going through my head. And as I'm reading this article, the doctor, basically a UK guy, and it's not even important what the article said, really, or who he was. It was the fact that what you put between your lips and into your gut is what you ultimately become. So understand, and I got this absolute crazy crystal clear realization. Wow, I'm in control. Wow, what a novel concept, right? So at that point, the guy says the diet, if you will, the prescription is 90 days. Actually, I think it was 30 days. 30 days of 1,000 calories or less. No matter how you slice it, he goes, at the end of those 30 days, you won't be clinically diabetic anymore. And all of those different diseases that are caused by generally food that we eat disappear. So I committed to do this for 90 days. I had an app and everything. I had a scale. I weighed everything. It was early days of apps, but I had a blood sugar part of that in there. So I tested my blood sugar before and after meals. And I started to really understand what would happen if I ate an avocado and hamburger and a steak versus pizza, chocolate bars, and bags of chips, right? drinking beer? What does wine do? As I start going through all of these different things, it became very apparently clear that in order to have, I'm wired as a meat and potatoes guy, so I don't work well on the vegetarian sort of diet. So I just went, I'm going to do 1,000 calories a day. I'm just going to stick to high protein. So it became meat, nut butters, nuts, eggs, avocado, like that sort of thing. 90 days later, not only do I feel great, I feel like I'm looking great. You know, I've dropped probably by that point in time 20 plus pounds, and my blood sugar was perfect. All my numbers were like in line. So I'm like, so all it really takes is hard work and discipline. Again, another light bulb went on, right? I've always been a hard work, disciplined guy around work and career, but again, working on me, not as much, not in the same way, not physically, right? So fast forward 12 years later, I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm clear. I'm really disciplined around, 3-day fasts on a very regular basis. So it's something that I've played with over the last 12 years.
A 3-day fast.
I've done 3 days. I've done just water. I've done bulletproof coffee fasts. I've done 10-day fasts.
You've done a 10-day fast.
I've done one 10-day fast.
How was that? Hard, I have to imagine.
Hard, but like everything, it's mindset, right? It's going into it early. And keep in mind, over the last 12 years, I'm pretty ketogenic is kind of what I'm in most of the time. So when you're in this ketogenic state, a 10-day fast isn't as hard if you just went from the standard American diet into a 10-day fast. So most people would go, I can't go more than my 18 hours without food or whatever, right? Or 12 hours. And I think most people would be surprised to find that 3 days is actually not that hard. Again, it's a mind over matter thing. My first fast, if I remember, I remember this very clearly, was actually the week I met you.
Really?
My first 3-day fast, and I remember it because in my head still, I go, oh, there's a pizza place around the corner from our office back then, and it was a great place to order pizza. And I remember I was on day 2 of this fast, and the team went and got these pizzas and brought them back. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a real test. This is going to be a test of whether I can get through this. And it was rough, man. Like it was, I mean, I would say one of the roughest things I've done, but not really, you know what I mean? But you get past those things. And I think I've never been a disciplined guy around what I eat, I would exercise and be at the gym a few days a week, play some sports, but never really have a regime, right? My regime was getting up early, going to the office, working hard, having fun, building a business, right? So through this health challenge, and I think things really do happen for you if you're able to actually see the good in things. And that's that seed where you can look at that fork in the road and go, I'm going to take that one this time. Let's see what happens, right? And over this amount of time, it's almost funny because this very much aligns to almost when we moved to California. So it almost feels like this California enlightenment too, where my buddies do make fun of me a little bit, where it's like, oh, I do yoga now. I go to the beach, I meditate, like all these funny California things. But the reality of it is all that shit works, right? So everybody I talk to who's interested in fasting, I would talk their ear off about the benefits of hitting day 3 at a fast. So not only what it does, autophagy and everything else on the science level, but just how you feel, right? If you could bottle what that is and give it to somebody, it'd be one of the hottest selling drugs on the market, right? You get you're high in your own supply because you're just so focused.
Is that, you're talking about day 3 of that?
Day 3.
Fast?
Look, lots of people, some people might get like a fasting flu type, like a keto flu type deal where they don't feel great. People get headaches. There's all kinds of downsides to the fasting. I've been lucky in terms of most of my fasting. It has not been anything like crazy physically hard other than just like you're hungry. You got habits that you want to, it's probably more habitual than it is anything else of just reaching for food. You know what I mean? But when you get to day 10, that's something else too, right? Because your mindset is, how do I get there, right? And if you're thinking about what your first meal is going to be, it's going to be a hard road. At least that's what I found, right? So it's more reframing food. It's fuel, right? It's what I need to do just to keep moving. So when you're on a fast, it's like, I don't really need that. I'm fueled, right? I exercised every day on a 10-day fast. That's cool too, right?
Very.
Where you go, oh, I'm getting a lot of these benefits. Anyway, I think we've been talking about fasting a lot, but as I go through the health benefits of that though, Sean, that led me back when I first started this 90 days, drinking alcohol didn't fit into my caloric intake. So I decided to stop drinking, right? I was in the advertising agency business. We had 3 or 4 dinners a week, and there would always be beer and wine or whatever it is, right? And it, it's a fairly social type industry. So again, I wouldn't police myself, but I was also, I was never a drink alone guy. So for me, giving up alcohol just wasn't an issue. It wasn't a hard thing, even though I liked drinking beer. So I just never went back to that. As you know, I'm not a drinker. I think I do 1 or 2 beer a year, maybe a glass of wine, but always special occasions, very intentionally. If my wife and I were in Europe for 10 days, so a beer and a glass of wine here and there is not a bad thing. It's the unintentional side of, if I keep doing that, it's a slippery slope. Then it's, more glasses, more of this. It's just more caloric intake that you don't need. And as I'm sure you know, drinking alcohol is just poisonous at the end of the day. It gets worse as you get older too, in terms of how it makes you feel.
I've been told.
Yeah. So, I think it's really having a reset and a reframe of how all that works, meeting guys like you who are dialed into health and wellness as a tribe. Like you had have a tribe of humans around you that are wired that way. So it's been fun to sort of build into that community and find that, doing hard things for long periods of time, whether that's fasting, ice baths, hot yoga is really hard and is my current addiction and my current fitness regime for the most part.
Funny enough, when you and I get together nowadays, we go for a sauna and ice bath.
Yeah.
That's how we catch up. When
That's
we
a
haven't
great way to chat.
Hey, let's go do a sauna. Let's go do a sauna and ice bath. You feel just like $1 million after it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love it. So you go through this health journey with type 2 diabetes, right? You kind of have a bit of a come to Jesus moment. You're like, I need to change. You start leaning into the fast, which, by the way, doing 1,000 calories for how long?
90 days.
90 days.
And I did that, Sean. It was the first time in my whole life that I ever like had any discipline around food. And I actually said to myself, you're not going to cheat on this at all. You need to be really focused and just be true to yourself on this one, right? This is your health, right? Pay now or pay later kind of mentality, right? So I said, you know what? All right, I'm doing this. And it was hard.
I bet.
Like 1,000 calories today is hard.
Yeah, I
right?
can't imagine how.
So 1,000 calories is
especially you're working
hard
out
to do.
too.
Working out, but again, after 90 days, you're like, oh wow, I did that. There's no reason I can't keep doing it.
Yeah,
maybe it's now 1,500. Let me see what that does. Then it was like a couple thousand. How do I want to settle into like a routine that's intentional?
So how did that lead to you wanting to go into the cannabis industry?
So after just giving up alcohol during this phase, me and a couple buddies that are Santa Monica dads, where our boys all hang out, and you end up getting your weekends, especially as your kids hang out, you're with these guys a lot. And so we found ourselves smoking weed instead of drinking alcohol. And as we're smoking, going, this is really social. And, if you do it the right way, you're not blasted and, falling asleep on the couch. It's a very functional product, right? So we'd all often just kind of joke, wouldn't it be cool to get into this green rush back then, right? One of the guys one Friday went, hey, I found an opportunity from, friend of a friend, cousin, sister's mother, whatever, we know a guy. So long story short, a few of us put some money to work, and 18 months later, we were looking at like where'd all our money go, which is the story of most people who jump into a cannabis investment, especially early on. There was a lot of people that were in that same boat. But we get into it looking at, of course, there's the recreational side of cannabis, but I think the big thing for me was the medicinal side of going, I choose not to take pharmaceuticals. I don't know the last time I took a pharmaceutical pill, including Tylenol, only because I can get a lot of that stuff from plants, right? And through trying other things, and quite frankly, the fitter I've become, the less I need any of that stuff anyway, because all of the issues that you might be dealing with kind of clear up when you're really intentional around your health, right? Right.
And I do remember having a conversation with you where you were like very much drawn to it because you're like, this is an alternative to pills.
100%.
Like people that are dealing with pain or dealing with their own things, like instead of taking a pill and getting addicted, you can do cannabis. And like you were drawn to that.
Look, I mean, there's lots of people that use cannabis now just to help them sleep, right? It keeps them to sleeping, right? Cancer patients, where they get nausea, right? They're able to take, whether it's a puff, an edible of some sort, a tincture, and their nausea disappears. Oh, and most people, when they are having chemo and stuff, they're not interested in eating. So it'll help stimulate appetite. But there's 1,000 different things that this plant can do. And not just cannabis, but ergo, the greater sort of psychedelic world, if you will, right? There's just a lot of stuff there that we've not been able to research for 100 plus years, that we're now finally getting to unlock as a society.
Yeah, and it's becoming much more acceptable too. Back then, it really wasn't. When you were first, I guess, dabbling into it, I would say, like.
Well, it was very non-accepted because it was illegal, right?
It's still illegal, but it seems as if it's trending in a direction where pretty soon it's not going to be legal, like federally. I know in certain states it's completely legal, and I would say if you talk to most people on the street, like right now, they're like, yeah, I'm totally fine with cannabis. Like, probably should be legal. And so that kind of led you to where you are now, like now.
Well, that led from that. We started an influencer house in the cannabis space up in the Hollywood Hills. That was fun, but at the end of the day, the cannabis space, again, it was pre-legalization. Most of the brands were just scrambling to figure out how to get their licenses in place. And that was a lot of money for a lot of those people, right?
Oh my gosh, I remember those days where you have to like pay an absurd amount of money to get a license, and there's only a certain amount of license. And then if you had some type of affiliation, or you got in trouble because of cannabis, you were more likely to get a license because like, I don't know what was going on with that, but I want to say if like you were incarcerated or like you got into some type of, I don't know, legal troubles due to cannabis, then like the state was more willing to give you a license to open up a cannabis shop, as in like, we're sorry for doing this to you. Now
social justice.
We're giving you a license to now sell the thing that we originally put you in jail for.
That was happening, still happening, where people are trying to get licenses and figuring out. I was at an event last week where they were talking all about that social justice stuff. So it was a bit of the wild, wild west still in cannabis. There were brands that were certainly getting built, some great entrepreneurs in that space, people that are just passionate about what they're doing, passionate about the plant, sovereignty for their own bodies. Like there's a whole bunch of issues you get into there, not just the natural nature of the product. From there, the influencer house, like I said, was I think a really good idea, but it was well before brands had the budgets to be able to spend, to be able to be in that type of an ecosystem where it was, training bud tenders and throwing educational events while it had that overall attractiveness of that mansion up in the hills kind of thing. So there's a way to sort of build contests and things like that in there for that overall kind of bud tender who's the ultimate influencer to the sale.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the stuff that we were doing in that house. That led to working with a CBD company, making topicals. We decided while everyone else was looking to get into selling at like storefronts, we decided to go to doctors. And as I went in, selling a lot of product to doctors as an alternative to all kinds of pain management products, not the least of which was opioids, which were then and still are an issue. people can't be on opioids for 20 years and expect their insides not to become Swiss cheese of some sort, right? So having pain management topicals that are made with sort of natural ingredients that come from, say, marijuana, CBD, hemp.
By the way, I don't even know if you know this. I am so passionate about this in regards to giving people alternatives besides the pharmaceutical drugs, because I've had two people in my family, like cousins, that served in the military. One of them had an injury in the military, got on, I always mispronounce it, opioids, and ended up actually dying because of it.
Oh, no.
Being so addicted. Yeah. And so I had another cousin that had the same situation because of this. And so it's like those products are so unbelievably strong, and there is probably a time and place for them, like under, a doctor seeing it, or you have acute pain and like there's something going on at the hospital.
There's no question.
Past that, these things are unbelievably addictive, and you need to be so careful.
There's no question.
And so you probably didn't even know that, but I've had two
I didn't
people
know that.
pass away.
That's incredible.
Cousins that were like much older than me, but they passed away because of, I guess, like overuse and abuse.
As sad as that story is, it seems like that is like the story. It's the headline that doesn't really get headlines anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just part of the system that we're in. So I think cannabis at the end of the day is fighting for those medicines to really break through, right? If you start looking at the psychedelic world, MDMA, psilocybin, and let's just say using those for veterans and PTSD.
Yeah.
Right? For one use case, those products are proving to be incredibly effective.
And life-changing.
Life-changing, effective. People, as they take them, not only do they report that whatever PTSD or other issues they're dealing with, they feel like they're more open and connected to those around them, to the world, to the universe, to God, if you will, to that energy. That's what happens when you take psychedelics. Wouldn't we want to understand a little bit more about like what's actually going on? It kind of puts you in reliably the same state with other people, where they come back and report very similar things, from geometric patterns to machine elves and like different universes that feel like you've spent your whole life there, or maybe an eternal amount of lives.
I don't know what the machine elves. I don't know about any of that stuff.
If you look at DMT,
well, that's something I actually wanted to talk to you about too. Is your experience not just with plant medicines with cannabis, but also your experience with plant medicines through some of these other modalities. And you were touching on something that I know a little bit about, just because I work with a Navy SEAL Foundation. Yeah. And there is a lot of the people that have served overseas that you can't imagine what they've been through. I mean, it's really hard for us as civilians to imagine what it's like to see a best friend or a brother get blown up, or you just see things in war that we can't fathom, and they have gnarly PTSD. And so they go through the VA system. It doesn't help. And so they go and hear about these other plant modalities done different places. I know some probably places do it here in the States, but a lot of what I've heard is actually down in Mexico or Central America or South America.
Brazil.
And they have these experiences where it alters them in a way where they come back to a certain degree healed and a different person and able to function in society like they never had before.
So we got friends of ours who, I'm not going to say their names, but they're a couple here in Santa Monica, very successful. He's a doctor. She's got a master's and a PhD, works in basically helping people in hospital systems. So over COVID, there was a trial apparently at UCLA. I believe it was for psilocybin and addiction. So she signed up to see what it was like, going, I'd like to sort of just see what this is.
And excuse my ignorance, but psilocybin, what exactly is that?
Magic mushrooms.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's the substance or the molecule, if you will, in that space. So at the time, COVID, she signed up for this, I believe because she thought she was just maybe drinking a bit too much wine. So she thought, I'm not quite like where I need this, but I'd love to see what this does. So she went there and she goes, not only did it take away, she got a master's late in life. And she told us over dinner one time the reason that she did this late in life because she didn't have the confidence to do it early in life. So she said after doing psilocybin, not only did she quit any of her addictions, if you will, but she felt like a different person where she felt worthy, right? Of I'm good enough to do these things, right? And I deserve these things. So she had just a complete change in her mindset. So then her husband spoke up, and he's a quiet guy, like you say, successful doctor. He's an immigrant here. He's been here for 30 plus years, built a really nice life. And he said growing up in Mexico, a big poor family, he said he always dealt with crippling anxiety and depression. And he learned to cope with it as he got older through a daily meditation. And he said, if I didn't do my meditation, that sort of anxiety, depression would just show up. So he goes, his wife, after she experienced psilocybin, she convinced him maybe 6 months later to try what would be called a hero dose or a medical dose, which is, I believe, 5 grams or more. So it gets you to the point where you're seeing geometric patterns and all sorts of things. And he said, after that experience, it was a life-changing experience, all positive, all fantastic, all new. He said, I go into meditation now, and he goes, I can't even find where that depression is anymore. It's not even there anymore. He goes, it just disappeared. So he goes, my brain's been rewired. So these are the kinds of stories you get just from one couple, right? They're now dedicating their lives to psilocybin, and I would assume other psychedelics, in helping people, seniors. There's a whole bunch of people that look at using these medicinal things as part of transitioning to your next life. So sort of as people are on their last days, right, their last breath, where psilocybin and these sorts of things are helping people integrate, if you will. So it's not just for like PTSD. There's all kinds of things. I mean, recreationally, if you do this, and I don't mean like let's go party and go see a DJ. I more mean, comfort of your own home, out in nature, really intentionally going, I really want to connect. I want some sort of a new epiphany. I want to see the world differently. I want to reset, right? I want to get rid of the gray filter and sort of come up with the bright, colorful filter again. Psilocybin and these other psychedelics do a lot of that. There's a lot of promise there. So I think there's a lot of people in the cannabis industry that have pushed for so many years to get cannabis legal. And we're seeing as an industry that the psychedelic industry is going through a lot of the same things. But a lot of people are hopeful that it'll happen a little bit faster on the legalization side, just because there's so much promise for these products for, again, going back to vets and PTSD, which is a major issue in this country.
Yeah. There are people that are speaking out on these types of things that I think are really well respected. I don't know if you know the podcast Sean Ryan Show. He's a ex-Navy SEAL, was in the CIA, dealt with serious PTSD, was an alcoholic.
Long, curly, black hair?
No, he's actually bald. He does like long form
I know who you mean.
podcasts. He actually, I was looking, he has like one of the top 5 podcasts in the world. Anyways, he's come out and spoken about this. And then I was just listening.
Oh, has he?
Yeah, I was just listening to a Joe Rogan podcast who had JD Vance on. And they're talking about this specific subject. And you can see, JD Vance is like totally open to this idea of, this is something we need to look into. And there's probably a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
And so to think those types of conversations are having, and how many people do those 2 people reach in regards to their podcast, right?
Yeah.
2 of the biggest podcasts in the world. Now you're starting to see that people are becoming educated on something that was very kind of taboo.
I think there's a consciousness sort of shift that's happening.
In regards to these things.
These things.
Yeah.
Yeah. An awakening, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
I had another guest on not too long ago, really incredible guy. He talked about his experience of going to Burning Man. And like he kind of referred to this consciousness where people are starting to kind of change the way they see the world and the way that they do work.
Yep.
Where there's a lot more like kindness in the workplace, and he thinks it has something for him. He used like his experience of like it changed the way I would go about doing my day to day. And so I think like that's actually happening. Like there is a consciousness. Now, I don't know if everyone's getting there through what you're talking about, but I think people are getting their eyes open to a different way of living that seems to be much more healthy.
Yeah, it's more based
better.
on nature, right?
Yeah.
It's people are realizing, go look at any grocery store, right?
They're depressing. Of grocery stores are depressing.
I'm mostly carnivore these days.
Are you?
Mostly. I mean...
But you've been mostly carnivore. I mean, you were paleo for a long time, and now
Yeah.
I'm hearing you're mostly carnivore, and it's working for you.
It also, once you stray off that, and you go out on a Friday night for dinner with a few couples and you order 10 different things,
you're
like...
so affected.
You're
your
like,
sleep,
oh
your
man,
gut,
like what did I do to myself?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's still going to some nice places. So getting rid of all the bullshit, and then you go into a grocery store and you look at the aisles and you go, oh, it just looks like a bunch of poison. Like for real, you know what I mean?
A bunch of poison. Those middle aisles, I would say, yeah, you're probably right. They're probably mostly poison.
Like a lot of those aisles are pretty poison.
Well, I'd also say too, and you experience this, I've experienced this, I know Mason has experienced this, is when you go clean, right? You start getting rid of the crap. It's hard at first, but then about a month to 2 months into it, you start noticing a change. You start feeling different.
Yes.
And then if you do it for an extended period of time, you start thinking about food as fuel, to your point. And then when you're in instances where you're like, oh, I'm going to go like do this thing and eat this thing, you feel the ramifications, and then you're like, I don't really want to do that. Like I don't really want to eat that because it's not worth it. You become addicted to feeling good.
Well said. Well said. It's so true.
Yeah.
Right? It's going, eating something on a Friday going, why the heck do I feel so bad? And then you realize, oh, it's a seed oil or there's a hidden some bullshit.
I mean, like the amount of stuff we have in our foods is just crazy.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely crazy.
These days I got a freezer full of meat from
Do you
Butcher
hunt?
Box.
Oh, from Butcher Box.
I don't hunt, but
I want to put together a hunt.
I'd go hunting. I don't hunt though, but I'd
You
go.
hunt, Mason? I want to go hunting because I think it'd be so cool, to like feed my family or like be able to like eat the thing that I sourced.
Yeah.
But then like, how cool would that be if you come over for a barbecue or whatever, and then I give you like a parting gift of like, Jeff,
here you go.
Here's some great meat that I actually like sourced and.
Right.
And then you have
it's organic. It's pasture raised.
I mean,
right?
it's legit the healthiest thing you could probably put in your body.
Yeah.
I might offend some vegans with that, but I'm like, I really do think that like when you get it from the source like that, it doesn't get much healthier.
Listen, one of my favorite meals these days is ground beef, grass-fed, grass-finished, cooked in tallow, 2 eggs, really sunny side. You throw that on top.
Are you doing cheese? I see sometimes people put
cheese.
like some Parmesan on top.
Yeah, I always do. The other day we did blue cheese on it, which is really good. And then you throw that in a bowl. You mix it up with your avocado, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like it's not torture. It's not like it's a hard meal to eat. It's fantastic.
The other funny thing is when you start eating like grass-fed or like these really clean meat, you realize it tastes so much better.
Yeah, it's got a different taste. I would say grass-fed. It tastes clean, but it doesn't taste better than some of the Wagyus and stuff like that. But that's getting into some pretty
fatty,
very fatty. Grass-fed, grass-finished is what we've sort of thrown into. COVID was good to us that way, where we get to cook a whole bunch of steaks and find out what kind we like and stuff like that. So
yeah. So someone who's, I guess, like plant curious, not from an eating standpoint, but more so the modalities.
Experience.
Yeah.
Perspectives.
Yeah. And I would say I fall into this category. You and I've had these conversations before. I've never done any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm open-minded. I'm curious. Like, what would you say to someone like me?
I would say...
And obviously you've never pushed any of this stuff onto me ever, but more so that it's like if you're telling someone about like the pros and the cons of like dabbling or being intrigued or curious about it, like what would you say?
I'd say go dabble. I'd say,
like,
but I'd say, do it. There's lots of people that offer this stuff here in the U.S. You could go on sort of, I guess you'd call it some sort of a tourism version, whether it's Brazil or Costa Rica, kind of you name it. There's all kinds of people that will offer that up. But I would say make sure you do it with someone that you trust, that you know is a safe place, that you know they source their product from the right places, and their intention is in the right place.
How do you go about setting the intention?
For me, so let me talk about ayahuasca. We've all heard about ayahuasca, right? So I've tried ayahuasca a couple of times, again, very intentionally.
Isn't that like the most intense plant medicine you can have?
Yep. Yeah, I'm assuming there might be a couple more, but they call it the mother energy. It's very much ayahuasca. It felt like it was just like calling me to like give this thing a try. So remember earlier I told you I did a 10-day fast. Mm-hmm. So when you do ayahuasca, there's a fast that comes along with it. There's energetic things that you're supposed to keep away from. There's habitual things, and then there's food items that you're supposed to stay away from. The caffeine. And if you're on too many prescription meds, they don't want you to do it. So they'll make sure you get into a good routine 10 days before. I decided to do a fast. I'm like, if I'm going to go into this the first time, I'm going to try to be as clear as I possibly can, sort of body, soul, mind, spirit, and just go in here and go, my intention is, set that intention. And back then for me, it was just to become more intentional, right? Everything I do, leaning in, the last decade for me has been really sort of reinventing a healthier version of me, right? Really focusing on health, but also energetically focusing on that side of it, feeding into people as much as I possibly can as well. The ayahuasca journey, like I said, it was tied to fasting. It was tied to just finding out, is there a better way to do things? Like I've heard so many people, it seemed like a lot of very smart, successful people have tried these products and they come out on the other end of it raving about it. What is that? Right? So I wanted to just go in and check it out. So I think the intention for me was just to be open around what this plant experience is actually going to do. Now, keep in mind, I've done multiple other psychedelics throughout my life with a very similar intention. Sometimes a little bit more on the fun side, but certainly enough intention that I know I'm going into this where this is going to be an intense psychedelic experience, likely from what I hear. People that go into this, most people are vomiting throughout the experience. You're certainly seeing all kinds of visions and hallucinations. But contrary to what a lot of people would think, you're not like losing your mind either, right? You're just in it. And we were lucky that we got it in a place where we were working with this chief of the Wanawa tribe from Brazil. And it was over a couple of nights. So they generally recommend you do ayahuasca over 2 nights. And so as we get in there, I was 10 days fasted. And so I didn't throw up. I drank. So the way they work it is from sundown to sunup, you got the chief who basically sings and he hosts, if you will, in a circle. There was probably 40 or 50 people in the room, and everybody was partaking. The chief would kind of size you up with his cup. You'd come up. He'd be singing very traditional songs. Everything's Portuguese, doesn't speak any English. Very powerful singer, instruments, the whole nine. He'd look at you and he'd kind of size you up to decide how big a cup maybe that you can handle. It's probably what it is or what you need, right?
And he's just doing that out of intuition?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, he said in their tribe of 400 or 600 people, they do ayahuasca as a tribe. The young kids, the elders, everybody does it together.
Kids.
Children. 2-year-olds, children.
But
they're not drinking.
That strikes me as strange.
Again, I look at this and I went in very open and said, well, who am I to challenge thousands of years of tribal knowledge?
Well, that's your open-mindedness.
Right? Yeah. And I'm very open-minded to this, but trying not to get caught up. There's many people that have tried ayahuasca and now they're on their 180th session. So they're addicted to something else, I think, in that case. I think ayahuasca for me was very intentional. I've only done it a few times. And coming out the other side of it, it's profound. It depends on what you need going in. I needed some sort of, everyone reliably gets an ego death. And that means that you actually feel like you're going to die. And it's not necessarily a physical, it's like this energetic side of things. The second time I did ayahuasca, not the second night, but the second session I did, I wasn't 10 days fasted, and I did end up throwing up on, I think, my second. I drank 4 times each night.
And the throwing up is basically the purge of the ego.
It's a purge. And I thought it was, and this might sound a bit weird, even though you're actually throwing up what's, inside you. And most people come up with like weird colors and stuff like that. But it feels energetic. It's like,
I don't know what you mean by weird colors. What do you mean people come up with weird colors?
Like all the, the bright oranges and yellows and just like the grossness that you actually just throwing up. Right? Because you're supposed to be relatively fasted on a bunch of things in here. So you're likely not going in there. You haven't just gone through the McDonald's drive-through. So you're not blowing up chunks, right? So you just got sort of some empty stomach stuff coming out. It looks gross. But energetically is where it's remarkable. It's almost like the guy singing, the chief, if you will, is like a whisperer of this energetic. It gets your body to want to purge. It's really an odd thing, and it's hard to explain until you go through it.
How I'm going back to the chief, or this guy that was kind of guiding you through this experience.
Yeah.
What type of cup did he give you?
Again, I drank 4 times. I would say it was probably 3/4 full, so it was fairly full.
Yeah.
So I can say that the first time I tried ayahuasca, the very first it takes 20 or maybe 40 minutes per session, if you will. I would say I was tripping balls because the hallucinations were so real. So for me, I'll give you an example of the very first one, and this doesn't sound great for any listener, I'm sure. But understand that going through the hard things is what you come out the other side, where you can get this sort of release, if you will, right? You're able to see things from a different perspective. So as soon as I go into this sort of, you're laying on a mat, like you're showing up in a very nice set and setting. You've got like a bunch of pillows and like you're comfortable, but you can hear people throwing up around you. So like, other people are in it too. So you're going, okay, I'm just going to stay in this. So as you stay in it, my whole world turned into this Wallace and Gromit Chicken Run type stop motion animation. And I'm like, this is weird, but it was internal. It was like my cells. It was my bones. And then all of a sudden, and it's happening fast and flashes, all of a sudden, I'm having what is a profound ego death. But it feels like this cartoon world that I'm now tuned into that's happening inside my body is actually like switching very quickly from ants burrowing through my bones as one thing, right? And where you're imagining what that pain would be. And your ego's dying this whole time. And it just flashes really weird, random snippets of way your body's dying inside. It's really strange, right? So that would go into maybe 20 or 30 minutes of just various, not as intense, but different things that would be basically battling your ego. If you resist, you have what's known as a bad trip. If you lean into it and just go, this is happening. I signed up for this. I want this to teach me whatever this plant medicine's supposed to teach me. Ayahuasca itself is 2 different elements in the jungle, a root and a vine, that come together to basically open up a channel so that DMT can be longer acting in your system. How the heck did they figure that out?
I have no idea.
Right? You start looking at just the tribal knowledge of how this just fixes people. As you go through this ego death, you come out the other side very reliably, where you feel more connected to everything. You feel like you have more purpose, or maybe in some cases you have a purpose. It's a very interesting thing, and for me, it's not something that I take lightly. It's not something that's even recreational because it's hard. It's not a fun evening. if you will, right? Because there's that, and then at the end of that, you've now got days to try to integrate what the heck was that, and grabbing on to that ayahuasca hallucination or whatever that is. It's like trying to remember a dream from last night or a month ago. There's an essence there, but it's not like the details aren't there anymore. You go, oh, but that really helped me through a lot of things. So for me, it just gave me a different mental mindset, allowed me to see everything, I'll say, with just brighter vision, right? Around the same time, within the same week, I'd signed up for another piece of plant medicine called Combo. Have you heard of this one?
No.
So Combo isn't psychedelic. Combo is completely different. You're supposed to drink, and the idea behind this one, as I understand it, is warriors in the jungle, the young men that are going out to hunt, as they have less and less luck hunting and bringing back a kill for the village sort of thing, the village looks at them as having run out of luck. They're just not lucky anymore. They need a reset of energy. So at least that's how it was sold to me. And so I said, you know what? Luck, I could always use a little bit of luck, but tell me what physiologically, what happens? Like why would I want to do this? So they rub the venom of an Amazon tree toad on an open burn. They burn you. And I'll run you through this real quick.
Wait. So let's take a step back. So you had your ayahuasca experience.
Had the ayahuasca
one
experience.
Or 2 nights, and then this is after that?
This was like maybe a week after. And
they do this.
This was optional. I signed up for this to go, yeah, I may as well get the full experience, right? So it was
your open-mindedness just blows my mind.
So I signed up to do this.
I'm going to get burned by a venomous toad.
Yeah.
Did they have cobras? Were the cobras going to bite you too?
That'd be cool, huh? The guy was playing with the cobra. Okay, bite him. So Combo, you go in, again, it's an intentional setting. In my case, there's a few other friends that went and did this. Mm-hmm. The idea is it does a reset on your system. Again, how it was explained to me, there's peptides in venom, right? And they burn an incense stick. They take that, and then I think I might even have it somewhere on my arm. They'll put a couple of burn holes on your arm, right? Little, and then they'll wipe the venom on there. Within 5 to 10 minutes, your body has a reaction to venom. And so as it does that, it starts to release a whole bunch of kind of like the heat shock proteins and all that you get in
sauna,
in sauna, and you start looking at how that works. This works in a very similar fashion on your organs. So before you get to your experience, you're supposed to drink a gallon of water. A gallon of water, if you've never done it, is extremely hard to do. It's just a big volume of water to start drinking and get it down in an hour or two, right? It makes your body really cold too, because even at room temperature water, putting that much in it starts to change your thermostat. So again, in a very similar setting as ayahuasca, you're laying down, you've got people that are around that are making sure you're safe. They've got buckets, and they call them the guardians. And you start purging. So you're throwing up, and you're basically throwing up the water you had while this venom is doing its stuff in your system. And it's supposed to make it so that everything in your system, like autophagy, gets a nice reset. Kind of going back to my 12-year 1,000 calorie for 90 days reset. It had that ring to me. It had the same kind of, if you try this, it'll do the same thing where it's going to clean out a bunch of your organs and have a nice little reset. So I committed to it for 3 days, did it. I'd definitely do it again.
You did that for 3 days straight?
3 days in a row.
How long did that last?
I showed up at 8 in the morning. I was out of there by 9:15. Didn't take very long. And
there's no psychedelic aspect to it? It's just more of like a purging of
It's a purging.
Being sick?
They have another product called Sanunga, which is an eye drop that's supposed to clean up your vision. Again, I don't know if it's placebo or not, but after doing these things, you go, wow, I feel remarkably good. So not so much that I'd want to go and do it once a week, but I got friends that do it on a monthly as just part of their, call it, wellness routine. So I think there's a lot of knowledge in these ancient rituals and medicines that can come down from, all kinds of tribes. And it's just a matter of being open. Just because it sounds like it's voodoo or something like that doesn't mean it is. It might be, though, but it doesn't mean it is.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that a lot of things that I thought were voodoo, the more I've explored it myself and done my own research, I realized, ooh, that wasn't what I was told or what I thought initially.
Yeah. I agree.
So I think like being open-minded is so important just in life in general.
Yeah. Being open-minded and going, yeah, like, what can I learn here?
Yeah.
Right? How's this going to help me?
So going back, understanding the purge, what was the venom called? That experience?
That was the venom of the Amazon tree frog.
Okay.
Yeah.
So understanding that, but going back to the ayahuasca experience, what was like, you said you just saw things more clear or like brighter, the world was brighter? How like on a really rainy day, a downpour day, especially here in LA where it doesn't rain very much, and after the rain's done, if it rains all morning, cats and dogs, the rain's bouncing off the pavement by 2 feet. When that's done, it just feels fresh, right? I think that's what it does. It gives you things to contemplate. It resets your perspective. I think it does that really, really well. And I'd say reliably, most other psychedelics do a similar thing. Yeah. It's interesting. I've had a conversation like this with a few other people, and they say that they were transformed from the experience, but it's almost hard. It's really hard for them to put into words. They know they're better off because of it, and they know this version of themselves is a much better version, they would probably say, but it's hard for them to articulate it.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who... He's an investment banker, lawyer, uber successful guy. And a while back, years ago, he asked if I would go on a psychedelic trip with him. So we tried LSD. And something that I'd tried in the past when I was in Canada, certainly I would never do that in the US. When you take these products together, there's even though you're not connected, but we are. We've got like we're sharing energetically this space we're in. These products, as you experience them together with a friend, you start to see colors as emotions and emotions as colors. You start to see the world a bit differently. It feels like you can manipulate molecules, but you're not crazy like you're going to jump off a building and go, I can fly. It's not that level. So my buddy, as the trip got going, it was really intense. Whatever product we had, I'll just say in hindsight, was really good. But it hits you like a freight train, especially if you don't know what to expect, which he didn't. So within the first hour, he was freaking out. I'm dying. I'll never see my wife again, my kids. Dude, I need to go. I need to leave. Call me an Uber. And I kind of grab him by the shirt and give him a little slap and go, dude, like, remember you signed up for this. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. But he's at a point where his energy was dark. And because you feel energetically a lot of the same things when you're in a trip like this together, he was pulling me down to that side. And I'm like, ooh, that can't happen because if we both have a bad trip, that could be a disaster, right? I'd never had a bad trip. But I'm like, oh, this feels dark. And so I start pulling away. We get to a point where there's the top of your high, if you will, where I call it the bliss moment. And it feels like you can manipulate, like Magneto and X-Men, like you can manipulate molecules and atoms, but you also feel deeply connected to everything. Like you feel like you can manipulate this stuff because you feel so connected to source, like you're plugged in to your buddy who's in the room with you. And at this point, his trip is going from really dark to he's getting this version of the same trip. And he looks at me and he's pretty wide-eyed. And I can tell that he's getting into the bliss moment. So his whole trip is changing from dark to maybe the best feeling he's ever had in his life. And he looks at me with all sincerity and he goes, dude, how long have you known about this? So that level of wow that these things get you to. And let's not forget, our government gave people LSD on experiments for years. The CIA were, all of these different. 2 weeks later, we were at this guy's place for dinner with maybe 10 or 12 other couples. And he looks at me and he goes, we're just about ready to sit down. He goes, do you mind if I tell the story about what happened a couple weeks ago with our trip? Because I think this is what you'll get as one of the most remarkable outcomes. He said, I'm going to tell you guys a story. A couple weeks ago, Jeff and I went on an LSD trip. And he goes, and it was the single most profound thing I've ever done in my whole life. His wife says, excuse me, what about me and the kids? And then he proceeded to talk about how it's just opened him up, how he's become a better guy. If I fast forward whatever that's been 6-8 years, he's developed a whole spiritual side to his persona that makes him a more fulfilled guy. He likes himself better, right? You start, it's looking at those things, and now he's got a dedication to figuring out like how much more of this is there? How much can I lean into a healthier lifestyle? How much can I do for family, friends, community, things like that? So it really does help people as they get into, I'll say, a safe setting to run through this just from, call it an average guy. He's not a guy that was gone to war that had PTSD because he saw his friends get blown up. He's, an average 40, 50-year-old dude that's looking for a bit of a reset, and it's changed his whole perspective.
Yeah, he's just another guy that just has his own stuff that he's dealing with.
Right.
And he used this as a way to kind of reset or to create some new perspective.
Yeah.
And then he's altered because of it, which when you talk about these things, being a man of faith, you and I have talked about this, like in the church, they talk about that experience of, once you lean in and you get to know Christ, right? Like it changes you, it alters you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things I hear from people that have had these like type of experiences where it seems as if like there's a lot of parallels between.
Well, and a lot of it, so my whole life, I grew up evangelical Christian, right? So,
which I know faith is a part of your life as well.
It's a huge part.
By the way, like I feel like I don't know that many people that use plant medicines, but also like go to church on Sundays like you do.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the ratio is, to be honest.
You would know better than I would.
Right?
It doesn't seem like there's that many, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, right? Because I'm sure the church, for the most part, would frown on this almost in no matter what church, because they don't understand it. It's like the average people don't understand it, right? But I think just like cannabis and, one of my businesses, we have a pain management topicals that we use CBD for, right? That's part of the cannabis plant. Well, there's a lot of people in the religious faith-based community that wouldn't use pain management products like this 5 years ago, but they're using them today because they see them as now acceptable. They wouldn't use them 5 years ago because they thought they were illegal. But then you sit and go, this product is made out of hemp. It's a plant. Isn't God the creator of all things? And if that's the case, then he created that plant and those molecules in there. Shouldn't we be checking out what those things do? Even if they alter your reality, maybe that's the point. I feel closer to God every single time I do this. So much so, I told my parents, who are very evangelical, who don't do any drugs that I'm aware of, or drink, and I told them several years ago about an LSD trip and how it's enlightened me. And I was more curious to know, why would you guys not want to try this? Right? If I can tell you that I feel closer to God, closer to family, more connected to my community, to the world, to the environment, why wouldn't you want to try it? Right? Are you afraid that you'd have your eyes opened? I would say with all of these things, it's just a matter of time before most people give them a try because they become a little bit more part of culture, right? They become things that are easier to talk about, right? We wouldn't have been talking about this on a podcast probably even 5 years ago. I don't think.
You're probably right.
Right? Maybe we'd be talking about cannabis, but cannabis is legal federally in Canada now. And it has been since 2017, I believe. That's remarkable.
Yeah.
Right? That's a country that has socialized medicine. So now if I'm a vet in Canada and I don't want to do opioids or any of the other multitude of pharma that I might have, a lot of vets have the option to take what they would otherwise spend on their drug, a pharma drug, and spend it on a cannabis-based product. So there's no reason we can't see that happening with psychedelics within the right, knowing that it changes your mind frame. So you can't be out in the general world expected to be operating at 100% efficiency, right? It just doesn't work that way. But there's lots of people that are changing in their Adderall or whatever other prescription they're on daily for their mental stability, and they're changing that in for microdosing other psychedelics. Right?
What's your take on Adderall?
So luckily I was never on it, and we never put our kids on it. Know lots of people that have had. To me, I mean, I've tried it a couple of times, just curious to know what it would make me feel like. And to me, it just feels like speed. So that's my take on it. I know lots of people that have ADD that are adults that are 20s and 30s that have been on Adderall their whole lives, and they don't think it does a whole lot to them. So my take is it's just another product that big pharma's figured out how to give you a daily dose of. That's all.
Yeah.
I had a very hard time when my youngest son was diagnosed with ADHD, and it's kind of like getting a diabetic diagnosis. Okay, here's the prescription. Mm-hmm. So for him, it was, do you want Ritalin or your choice of 3 other Ritalin knockoffs? So, or Adderall, I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just it'd be a lot better to be able to give your kid something natural that helped them, or even better yet, realize that the reason these kids have ADD or whatever fucking bullshit they're spewing is they're sitting in a classroom, they're bored stupid, they've got the world's knowledge, the world's entertainment at their fingertips, and yet they're still expected to learn about world history.
Yeah.
From somebody boring at the front of the room.
Yeah. So I think if you were to talk to any doctor, which I've been prescribed with having ADD, ADHD, like all of those things. Like,
have you been on Adderall?
I have tried Adderall. Yeah.
As an adult or as a teen or?
As an adult.
Okay.
Yeah, as an
and
adult.
What did you think of it?
I think it has very addictive it has very addictive traits. Mm-hmm. As in, if you're someone who likes to be a go-getter, if you have like this achievement, drive, ambition, and you take something like that, it's like the Limitless drug from that movie. It's just crazy. Yep. But there are ramifications where you become a little bit addictive. It becomes a little bit addictive. I didn't like how I found it altered me. I wasn't in tune with my gut. I also found that sometimes coming off of it, I changed. I was much more irritable. I was short-tempered. There was things where I was like, what, this isn't great.
It's not worth the trade-off.
But going back to what you're saying.
Have you ever tried modafinil? Or Art Vigil or any of those?
No.
Those are like limitless drugs developed by DARPA and stuff like that are supposed to keep first responders awake for 72 hours.
Well, going back to like what you were saying about ADD and ADHD, when I was a kid and I was in classrooms, it was very hard for me to sit still and listen. I was like, my mind was wandering. I was bored out of my freaking mind. You and I have been talking here for almost 2 hours. I haven't looked at my phone. I haven't been bored one time. Mm-hmm. And it's like you could look at ADD or ADHD as like it's such like a negative thing in your life, but you could also look at it as somewhat of a superpower. Yeah. And you just need to find the thing that you're intrigued and interested in, and then you're going to go all in on that thing, and you're going to have crazy focus. Yep. And so I don't do any of that stuff. I do like more natural stuff, as in like I'll go work out, or go get vitamin D, go out, out in the sun, or go jump in a cold plunge or a sauna. Like there's ways I can remedy when my mind's just going crazy, but I also find I just need to like lean into things that I'm more interested in.
Yeah, and get whatever your natural flow state is, it's do more of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's do more of that. And I also found that like the drug that I'm obsessed with that I try to take every day is just exercise. That is literally like, that's way better than Adderall or like any other drug that I've ever taken. It
takes effort.
It does take effort.
Right.
Yeah. Which that's part of what makes it, I mean, to your point, like effort and hard is actually good on the other side of it.
Yes.
So in the workout itself, putting my shoes on and going to a 6 a.m. CrossFit class, it's freaking dark and cold. It is brutal.
Yep.
But then once I'm there in community and I see my friends and I'm high-fiving and we go through the workout, it's like, it's kind of brutal. It's not great. Yep. And then you're on the other side of it. You're sweating. You're done. And you're like, heck yeah.
Yep.
I just made myself better.
And you feel great.
You feel great.
Yep.
Yeah, you're riding that high.
There's no question.
Yeah.
No question.
Cool.
I started... I think I told you I bought a motorcycle earlier in the year. Because
I've talked to you about that. I cannot believe you did that.
My youngest son is up in the canyons all the time, so I would.
That's cool for like family bonding.
It's so much fun.
But those things are dangerous, man.
Well, so is surfing.
No, not even close. Do you know how many people die a year because of shark attacks?
A lot.
No.
More. Well, none if you weren't in the water.
No, more people die from coconuts falling on their head than getting eaten or bitten by a shark.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that's a big deal. Yeah, but flow state wise.
Yeah, you're in the flow state with the motorcycle. Yeah, because it's like life or death.
Well, it's not only that though, because there's that's one way of looking at it. The other way is just more fun.
Yeah,
right.
It is fun.
It's you're the more you can spend, I think, your time in something that you just love doing. Mm-hmm. That we were talking about ADD. It just disappears.
Yeah, it does.
Right.
Also, there's like something you and I have chatted about outside of this podcast is just longevity and like blue zones. And I think like as we study it more, you can do all of these things in regards to like sleep, food, fitness, vitamin D, being in community. But I'd also tell you that like one of the main ingredients to living a long life is happiness.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fun. Mm-hmm. It's joy. So it's like leaning into those types of things.
Yeah. More joy.
Trying to have just more fun in life.
Yes.
And so kind of like trying to lean into like things that you're like, oh, that sounds fun. Like that looks fun. I want to go do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, dude, this is amazing. I like always love our conversations. You're someone who has enlightened me on many things throughout the years and just like opened my eyes to like things that I just knew nothing about. And I appreciate the man you are. And like, thanks for being on the podcast. This was a ton of fun.
I'd love to do it again, Sean. This has been a great time.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Yeah. Oh, last question before we go. We always ask the audience if there's any books or podcasts that you'd recommend.
Books or podcasts? Yeah, I'd say Stealing Fire.
That's a great one.
Is a great book. The Four Agreements.
Yeah.
Is a favorite sort of staple.
By the way, going back to what you said about not being flaky, that's being the Four Agreements. They talk about being impeccable with your word.
Yeah.
So that's in there.
Well, I think the impeccable with your word, it's learning how to do that with yourself too, right? Keeping yourself. It's true. It's to that idea of I'm gonna get up at 6 and hit that workout, right? It's doing that. Podcasts. Let me ask you a question if you don't mind.
Okay, go for it.
At what speed do you listen to your podcasts and audiobooks?
1.5.
Wow, 1.5.
1.5.
Weak.
I know you're at like 3 or something.
I think I'm at 2.5.
That's crazy.
2.5. Look,
people will jump into my car and they'll be like, "What the heck are you listening to?"
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine listening to 2.5.
I like listening to Joe Rogan's. Always a good listen. He's got great guests on there.
Do you feel like you're really taking away concepts and ideas when you're listening to it that fast?
I do.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the ADD brain that sort of somehow slows it down. Yeah. I don't know what exactly it is. I can't listen to regular speed podcasts anymore. But yet I can listen to somebody. There's a lot of hours of a Joe Rogan in your ears. I might just have a lot more of it in there. Yeah. And people who you listen to at 2 times speed or 2.5, they sound like a little bit on the slow side when you listen to them at regular speed too.
That does happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Cool, man.
This has been awesome, Sean.
You're the man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
brother.
you on. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Appreciate you.
And that's a wrap.